Kemi was the pride of her family. Growing up in the small but vibrant town of Elisa, she was known for her beauty and intelligence. Her smooth, dark skin glowed like polished ebony, and her bright eyes seemed to hold a world of possibilities. Teachers often used her as an example in class. "Be like Kemi," they would say. "She's disciplined and serious." At home, her parents adored her. Her father, a local school principal, would beam with pride whenever her report card arrived. Her mother, a trader, would boast to her customers about Kemi's grades. "She'll be a doctor one day," her mother would say confidently. Kemi had dreams too. She wanted to study medicine, make her parents proud, and one day build a hospital in Elisa where the poor could receive free care. In secondary school, Kemi excelled in every subject. She was a model student, calm, focused, and polite. While other girls giggled about boys and gossiped during breaks, Kemi spent her time solving math problems or reading novels. Her friends admired her. "Kemi, how do you do it?" they often asked. She would smile shyly and say, "I just try my best." But Kemi's calm and disciplined life came crashing down one fateful evening. It was a Thursday, and Kemi had stayed back after school for a group study session. The streets were unusually quiet as she walked home. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and red. Kemi clutched her books tightly and quickened her pace. She didn't notice the group of men watching her from the shadows of an alley. Just as she turned a corner, they pounced. 5 of them. Kemi screamed, but no one came to her rescue. Her book fell to the ground as they dragged her into an abandoned building. Her cries echoed in the empty structure, but the men didn't care. They overpowered her one by one, breaking her spirit and shattering her world. When they were done, they left her on the floor, bruised and broken. Kemi managed to stagger home. Her mother noticed her torn clothes and swollen face. "Kemi, what happened?" Kemi forced a smile. "I fell on the way home," she lied. Her mother frowned but didn't press further. That night, Kemi locked herself in her room and cried until she couldn't anymore. Her body ached, but it was her soul that hurt the most. She couldn't bring herself to tell anyone, not her parents, not her friends, not even her teachers. For weeks, she stayed in a shell, avoiding questions and refusing to go to the hospital. She buried the pain deep inside and decided to focus on her studies. Years passed, and Kemi gained admission to the University of Ibadan, one of Nigeria's most prestigious institutions. Her parents were ecstatic. "She's going to be great," her father said proudly. Kemi promised herself that university would be a fresh start. No one would know about her past. She would bury it and move on. She gained admission to study her dream course, to become a medical doctor, a seasoned one. She attended lectures, studied hard, and even made new friends. Her roommates admired her dedication and often joked that she would graduate as the best graduating student. "Kemi, you're too serious," one of them teased. "I just know what I want," Kemi replied with a small smile. Second semester of her first year, Kemi began to change. It started slowly. She skipped a lecture here, missed a group study session there. Her roommates noticed, but didn't say much. "Kemi, are you okay?" her closest friend Tola asked one evening. "I'm fine," Kemi replied curtly. But she wasn't fine. The memories of her past haunted her. At night, she had vivid nightmares of that day in the abandoned building. She woke up in cold sweats, her heart pounding. To escape the pain, Kemi started going out more. She made new friends, boys and girls who didn't care much about lectures. They introduced her to a different world of late-night parties, alcohol, and smoking. Within a few months, Kemi was unrecognizable. The studious, disciplined girl her roommates once knew had turned into a party-loving, carefree young woman. She stopped attending lectures, spent most of her nights out, and rarely returned to the hostel before dawn. Her friends were confused. "Kemi, what's going on? You've changed so much," Tola asked one night. "Nothing is wrong," Kemi said with a dismissive wave. "Stop worrying about me." But Tola couldn't help but worry. By her second year at the University of Ibadan, Kemi was living a double life. During the day, she still attended lectures occasionally, showing just enough effort to avoid raising suspicion among her lecturers. To her roommates, she claimed she was just trying to enjoy university life, but at night she was someone entirely different. The quiet, disciplined Kemi from Ilesa was gone. In her place was a carefree, reckless version of herself who drowned her pain in loud parties, alcohol, and fleeting encounters. Her new friends encouraged her. They didn't care about grades or responsibilities, and for Kemi, that made them easy to be around. "You're finally living," one of them, a girl named Sonia, said one night as they danced at a packed-off campus club. "Forget all that serious girl nonsense. This is the real fun." Kemi laughed, her head buzzing from the alcohol she had been sipping. In moments like these, it was easy to forget the nightmares that waited for her when the music stopped. As the weeks passed, Kemi's escapades became harder to hide. Students began to notice her frequent absences from lectures and her late-night returns to the hostel. Whispers spread quickly. "Kemi? The one from Queen Elizabeth Hall?" one student said in a hushed tone during a group study session. "Yes," another replied. "I heard she doesn't even go to lectures anymore. She's wild now, parties all the time," someone else added. But it wasn't just her partying that caught people's attention. Rumours about her encounters with men began to spread. At first, they were vague, people speculating about her growing circle of male acquaintances. "Have you heard about Kemi?" a boy in the cafeteria whispered to his friend one afternoon. "No, what about her?" "She's generous," the boy said, lowering his voice. "You know, with the guys." "For real?" "Yes, and get this, no protection. That's her only rule." His friend's eyes widened. "Raw? No condoms?" "Exactly." The rumours seemed too outrageous to be true, but as more men came forward with similar stories, they began to gain traction. Tola, Kemi's closest roommate, tried to intervene. After hearing yet another whispered conversation about Kemi, she decided to confront her friend. "Kemi," she began cautiously as they sat in their room. "Can we talk?" "What is it, Tola?" Kemi asked, not looking up from her phone. Tola hesitated. "I've been hearing things about you." Kemi's fingers froze, her grip tightening around her phone. "What kind of things?" "People are talking, Kemi, about the parties, the men, the rumours about you, and..." Tola trailed off, unsure how to continue. Kemi finally looked up, her expression unreadable. "Tola, do you believe everything you hear?" "I don't want to believe it," Tola said softly. "But you've changed so much, Kemi. I barely recognize you anymore. I just want to know what's going on." Kemi forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Nothing's going on, Tola. People like to gossip, that's all. Don't let it bother you." Tola wanted to press further, but something in Kemi's tone stopped her. It was late in the evening, and the hostel was unusually quiet. Tola had stayed back to clean their shared space while Kemi was out. As she straightened the bed sheets, her hand brushed against something hard beneath Kemi's mattress. Curiosity gnawed at her. She hesitated and pulled out a folder tucked away under the bed. Her eyes skimmed the first page and then stopped. She blinked, her breath catching in her throat. Her hands began to shake as she turned to the next page. What she saw next made her stomach twist. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her mind raced, refusing to process the words staring back at her. She slammed the folder shut, her heart pounding so loudly it felt like it might burst out of her chest. For several moments she couldn't move. Her fingers clenched the folder so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Was this real? The date on the document wasn't recent. It had been there for months. Everything. The rumours, Kemi's strange behaviour, the string of relationships suddenly made a terrifying kind of sense. Tola sat frozen, the folder still in her lap, as panic surged through her. She wanted to scream, to cry, to confront Kemi immediately, but fear paralysed her. What if Kemi denied it? What if she lashed out? What if it was true? When Kemi finally returned that night, Tola was sitting on the bed, the folder resting on her lap. She didn't even bother to hide it. Kemi froze the moment she stepped through the door. Her eyes darted to the folder, and for a brief moment, Tola saw something crack in her usually confident expression. "Kemi," Tola said, her voice trembling. "What is this?" Kemi didn't respond. She simply stared, her face pale. "Kemi, talk to me." Tola's voice rose, the panic she'd been holding back finally spilling out. "What is this?" "You shouldn't have gone through my things," she said, her voice low but sharp. "Don't do that. Don't make this about me. You lied to me. You lied to everyone." Kemi's eyes filled with tears, but her voice hardened. "I didn't lie." "Then what do you call this?" Tola snapped, waving the folder. "This isn't a joke, Kemi. How could you hide something like this? Because no one would understand," Kemi shouted, her voice cracking. "Understand what?" Tola's voice softened. "Kemi, please tell me." But Kemi shook her head. "You don't get it. You'll never get it." "Kemi, I can't help you if you won't talk to me." "You can't help me," Kemi said flatly. "No one can." She turned and locked herself in the bathroom. Tola sank back onto the bed, tears streaming down her face. She clutched the folder, unsure what to do. Tola barely slept that night. She kept replaying the confrontation in her head over and over. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the fear that someone else might already be in danger. But what could she do? If she told someone, Kemi's life would be over. Yet if she kept quiet, more people could get hurt. By morning, the weight of the secret felt unbearable. Tola decided to tell Chica, their other roommate, hoping for advice. Chica's face drained of colour as she listened. "Tola, this is serious. You can't just sit on this." "But what if she gets hurt? And what if someone else does?" Chica snapped. Reluctantly, Tola agreed to speak to the hostel warden. But before she could, Chica told someone else, and within hours the rumour spread like wildfire. By midday, the entire hostel was buzzing. "Did you hear about Kemi?" someone whispered. "They said she's sick. Not just sick, dangerous." "Kemi is HIV positive," one girl whispered in the hallway, "and she's been sleeping with men without protection." "No way." "It's true." Tola found the medical report. The news spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of the campus. For the men who had been with Kemi, the situation was a nightmare. Some stayed silent, too ashamed to admit their involvement. Others sought solace in denial. "She's lying," one boy claimed to his friends. "She's making it all up to ruin people's lives." "Better safe than sorry, bro," his friend replied. "You should go get tested." Lines at the campus clinic stretched out the door as students rushed to check their HIV status. The nurses, overwhelmed by the sudden influx, worked tirelessly, their faces etched with exhaustion and worry. The university authorities quickly got wind of the situation. Kemi was summoned to a disciplinary hearing where the allegations were laid out in front of her. The room was silent as the committee members stared at Kemi. She sat calmly, her face devoid of emotion, as the head of the committee spoke. Kemi Adebayo, you are accused of engaging in reckless behavior that has endangered the health of others. Do you deny these allegations? No, Kemi said simply. The members exchanged uneasy glances. So, you admit to knowingly spreading HIV on this campus? The head asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Yes, Kemi replied, her tone steady. The room erupted in whispers. Why? One of the members asked. Why would you do such a thing? Kemi looked up, her gaze cold and unflinching. Because they deserve it, she said. Who deserves it? All of them, Kemi said, her voice breaking for the first time. All the men who think they can take without consequences. All the people who look the other way while people like me suffer. Her words hung in the air, heavy with pain and anger. Kemi was expelled from the university immediately. The committee's decision was swift and unanimous, but the damage was already done. Her name became a curse on everyone's lips. For some, she was a villain. For others, a victim of a world that had failed her. The campus of the University of Ibadan was in disarray following the revelation of Kemi's secret. Her name was on everyone's lips, spoken in whispers and shouts, fueling conversations in lecture halls, cafeterias, and hostels. Did you hear? One student asked in a hushed tone. She admitted it. She said she did it on purpose. I can't believe it, another replied. It's like something out of a movie. After her expulsion, Kemi disappeared from campus. She left the hostel quietly, her belongings packed into a small suitcase. No one saw her leave, and no one knew where she went. Rumours swirled. Maybe she went back to Elisa, one student speculated. I heard she moved to Lagos, another said, probably to start over. Do you think she feels any remorse? Who knows? She didn't seem to care during the hearing, but the truth was far more complicated. Kemi wasn't just running from the campus or the fallout of her actions. She was running from herself. Kemi returned to her hometown of Elisa briefly, seeking refuge in the familiarity of her childhood home. But even there, she couldn't escape the weight of her actions. Her mother was the first to notice the change in her daughter. Kemi, you've been so quiet since you came back, she said one evening as they sat in the living room. What's troubling you? Nothing, Mama, Kemi replied, forcing a smile. But her mother wasn't convinced. She saw the shadows under Kemi's eyes, the way she avoided conversations, and the heaviness in her footsteps. One afternoon, while tidying Kemi's room, her mother stumbled upon the same medical report that Tola had found months earlier. The words, HIV positive, stared back at her, and her heart broke. Kemi, she said softly when her daughter returned home that evening. What is this? Kemi froze, her eyes darting to the paper in her mother's hand. I found this in your room, her mother continued, tears streaming down her face. Why didn't you tell us? Kemi sat down heavily, unable to meet her mother's gaze. Because I couldn't, Mama, she whispered. How could I? How could I face you and Papa knowing this? Her mother sobbed, pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. Oh, my child, why didn't you let us carry this burden with you? It took hours, but Kemi finally opened up to her mother, recounting the events that had led to her diagnosis. She spoke of the attack, the shame, and the pain she had buried deep inside. Her mother listened silently, her heart breaking with every word. You were just a child, she said finally. You didn't deserve this, none of it. But I let it destroy me, Kemi said bitterly. I became someone I don't even recognize." Her mother held her tightly, whispering prayers and promises of support. "We will face this together, Kemi. You are not alone." Back at the university, Kemi's absence did little to calm the storm she had left behind. The men she had been with remained in turmoil, each one grappling with the possibility of a positive test result. "Why didn't she warn anyone?" one student asked during a heated conversation in the hostel common room. "She wanted revenge," another replied. "She said so herself. She thought we all deserved it. But not everyone hurt her. Why punish everyone for what a few men did to her?" The debate raged on, splitting the campus into factions. Some students condemned Kemi, labeling her as a monster. Others, particularly women, sympathized with her, seeing her as a broken person trying to cope with unimaginable trauma. "She was a victim first," one female student said. "We can't ignore that." "But does that excuse what she did?" her friend countered. "She ruined lives." The university administration, desperate to restore order, issued a statement addressing the incident. They promised stricter health checks and more comprehensive counseling services for students. "This is an isolated case," the statement read. "We are committed to ensuring the safety and well-being of all our students." But many students were skeptical. "Isolated?" one boy scoffed. "It only got this far because they ignored the warning signs." "They're just trying to save face," another said. Kemi's story reached the ears of some of the men she'd been with, and one of them decided to confront her and have his revenge. She couldn't possibly ruin his life and get away with it. His name was Dele, a final-year student who had been among the first to hear the rumours but had dismissed them as lies, until now. Through a mutual acquaintance, Dele tracked Kemi down to her aunt's house in Ibadan, where she had gone after leaving Ilesa. She was as good as dead. He would end her for good. "Kemi," he said when she opened the door, his voice shaking with anger as he pointed a gun at her, stepping inside uninvited. She froze, her face pale. "Dele, what are you doing here?" "I came to give you one last chance to explain yourself," he said. "Why didn't you tell me? You thought I was a fool." Kemi sighed. "You wouldn't understand," she said flatly. Dele was more angry. "Did you think you could get away with what you've done?" He broke off, his voice cracking, his gun tightly clinched. Kemi's expression softened. "Would you have treated me any differently if you knew? Or would you have run like everyone else?" Dele had no answer. "I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want pity," Kemi continued, "and because for a long time I didn't care. I was angry at the men who hurt me, at the world for letting it happen, and at myself for being weak." Dele stared at her. He saw that she wasn't moved by the gun pointing at her. She wasn't even afraid to die. He realized he was dealing with someone crazier than him. His anger slowly began to melt into something closer to sorrow. "What you've done, being reckless and dying, is not the solution." He shook his head. "You can't keep running from the problem." Dele's words stuck with Kemi long after he left. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly confront the pain she had buried for so long. She sought out a counselor, someone who could help her unpack the years of trauma and anger. It wasn't easy. There were days when she wanted to give up, to retreat back into the darkness. But she pushed forward one step at a time. Her mother remained her pillar of strength, praying with her and reminding her daily that she was loved. "Kemi, you are more than your past," she said one morning. "God isn't finished with you yet." Years later, Kemi returned to Ilesa to open a clinic. It wasn't the big hospital she had once dreamed of, but it was a place where she could help others the way she had needed help herself. "I'm not proud of everything I've done," she said during the opening ceremony of the center, "but I've learned that even the darkest parts of our lives can teach us something, and I want to use what I've learned to make a difference," and she did. If you enjoyed our story, please subscribe and share with your friends for more amazing stories to come.